Live from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We start in Venezuela, where President Nicolas Maduro is now speaking in the northern state of Nicaragua. You're looking at live pictures of Maduro addressing the supporters. The crowd is made up mostly of young people. He said that 1 million young people have been incorporated to work as part of the Chamber Juvenil Plan. Maduro has been asking for support to overcome the economic blockades against the country. International observers who will oversee the election process have arrived in Caracas.
Defender con votos. Con votos. Defender con la conciencia.
Meanwhile, the opposition candidate Henry Falcon has also been on the campaign trail. While turnout for Falcon hasn't been as massive, the progressive advance candidate has picked up support from the traditional opposition voters. With more, we have a report from our correspondent, Ian Bruce, in the Minas de Baruta neighborhood of Caracas. And we're being joined live by Ian Bruce in Caracas. Ian, where does the opposition finally stand, and are they backing Falcon or are they still boycotting the election?
Well, Soini, it's been a fascinating day to try to get to grips with some of the tensions and differences operating within Venezuela's opposition ahead of these elections on the 20th of May. As you say, Henry Falcon...
Okay, we seem to be having slight technical issues with our connection with Ian Bruce. We are going to go back to him in a little bit as soon as we get that situation sorted. And we have other news now. The Venezuelan government announced the arrest of top executives of the country's leading private bank, Banesco, for attacks against the country's currency. SAB said the arrest of the 11 senior executives of Banesco took place after the investigation carried out in the framework of an operation called Hands of Paper, which seeks to dismantle groups that allegedly attack the Venezuelan economy through the extraction of cash and illicit exchange. The news comes a day after Venezuela's Vice President, Tarek El-Assemi, announced that irregularities have been revealed during investigations into illegal currency exchanges.
The grand total of people detained up until now, who have been arrested by instruction of the Attorney General's office, is 134 people. But I must point out that the apprehension orders are 398. We have carried out 300 raids, and we have blocked 1,380 accounts, of which approximately 1,000 belong to Banesco.
Nicaraguan bishops held a press conference ahead of the start of dialogue with the Superior Council of Private Enterprise, which the church will mediate. The bishops read a statement which called on students and members of participating groups to define their agenda and put forth representatives so that the talks can soon begin. The talks come after several days of protests in Nicaragua, which left several people dead.
We request that all sectors that are participating in this national dialogue to make public their support for those involved in the national dialogue, in order to define a mutually agreed upon agenda and open our hearts to resolve our problems with peace, responsibility, and through dialogue.
Meanwhile, the opposition candidate Henry Falcon, the head of the Bolivian Civil Aeronautics Association, has announced the reorganization of administrative and technical services. This comes a year and a half after a plane crash in which 76 members of the Brazilian football team died. The Bolivian authorities have approved a report on the accident. which said the crash was caused by a lack of fuel as well as by human failure. 76 members of the Chapecoense football team and cabin crew died. 6 persons survived the plane crash. Bolivia wants to have a better control of aircraft to avoid tragedies like this in the future.
Se realizará un proceso.
We will begin a process of administrative, technical, and organizational in the general direction of Bolivian civil aeronautics. Finally, informs about the organizational structure of the airport administration and the air navigation auxiliary services will be required. This to receive an issue amendment regarding the Bolivian air regulations, with the purpose of changing the technical requirements that are needed to be met by the air service provider in our state.
Staying in Bolivia, Gonzalo Rodriguez Fernandez has taken office as the new vice minister responsible for preventing smuggling. Bolivia loses at least $350 billion every year due to smuggling. President Evo Morales created a new government department to tackle the crimes. Morales also promised to equip border custom officers with better resources. Now, today is World Press Freedom Day. The purpose of the day is to highlight the many dangers that journalists around the world face while doing their jobs. Now, so far this year, 36 journalists have been murdered, with Mexico being singled out as a particularly dangerous place for journalists. So we're featuring this special report on the subject from members of our multimedia team, Mariana Gongora and Alejandro Ponce.
2017 was one of the deadliest years in Mexico for journalists, with 13 murdered across the country. And in spite of all the outrage caused, those responsible have not been brought to justice.
My name is Jonathan Rosas. I'm 27 years old. I'm from Veracruz. I do photojournalism, documentary, and artistic photography.
Jonathan, like dozens of journalists in Mexico, left the country a year ago after being threatened. In Veracruz, during Javier Duarte's government, 17 journalists were murdered, 5 disappeared, and dozens were exiled from Mexico. Among them was photojournalist Ruben Espinosa, a colleague and close friend with Jonathan. Ruben was threatened in Veracruz and went to Mexico City for protection, but he was murdered in 2015 in the Narvarte neighborhood along with 3 women.
After Ruben's murder, we realized that no journalist in Mexico is safe. I ran the archive of La Unión newspaper. 3 days before the anniversary of Ruben's death, someone broke into my house and stole my computer, my camera, and my hard drives. The way it happened in Veracruz, and especially with my stuff being stolen, it felt like a sign. In that moment, I decided not to investigate. I thought the best thing to do was to try and avoid any violence that might follow. This crisis has made people stop investigating incidents like this, and I think that threats and violence are increasing. I don't know if in this electoral year something will change, but it looks like it won't.
So far in 2018, 36 journalists have been killed around the world. The most dangerous countries to be a reporter are in Afghanistan, Yemen, Colombia, and India.
We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Just heard that the caravan coming up from Honduras is broken up, and Mexico did that. And they did it because, frankly, I said, you really have to do it. We're going to have a relationship on NAFTA. We're going to have to include security in NAFTA. NAFTA's been a terrible deal for the United States. We're renegotiating the deal right now. They have to do it. Otherwise, I'm not going to do the NAFTA deal. NAFTA's been fantastic for Mexico, bad for us. this is a caravan of a lot of people coming in this case from Honduras. If it reaches our border, our laws are so weak and so pathetic, you would not understand it.
Adiós, mi amor. Adiós. Dale un beso nada más. Dale un beso nada más.
No somos delincuentes, somos padres y somos niños que son el nuevo futuro, la nueva oportunidad de vida y les suplicamos que nos escuchen.
I think better than being president, I was maybe good at building.
Welcome back. Now, returning to an earlier story, the Venezuelan opposition candidate Henry Falcon has also been on the campaign trail, while throughout the turnout for Falcon hasn't been as massive. The progressive advanced candidate has picked up support from traditional opposition voters. With more, we have a report from our correspondent Ian Bruce. Actually, we have a live with Ian. Ian is joining us live from studio. We're going back to Ian. Ian, where does the opposition finally stand? Are they backing Falcon? Are they still boycotting the election?
It's quite confusing, isn't it, Soini? And I'm sorry we lost, as I was trying to explain to you earlier, we had some technical problems. We thought, there were rumours this morning that the opposition, the old traditional opposition, might soften its position on the boycott. It didn't do that. It reaffirmed its boycott. But you can see the pressure that they are under and the differences that are opening up amongst them. When we went this afternoon with Henry Falcon, he was doing a walkabout, pressing the flesh in a poor neighborhood of Caracas, in a relatively rich region of Caracas. And it was clear there, very interesting things that happened there. The grassroots supporters of some of those old traditional opposition parties that are calling for a boycott were out there campaigning for Falcon. So you can see the tension that's opening up even within some of those parties between their members on the ground and the leaders, because a lot of people are just saying, we want to vote. The only way, I mean, they want change. They want to get rid of this government. The people who are campaigning with Falcon, even from those old traditional parties, but they think the only way of getting change is through the ballot box, and they don't agree with their leaders' call to boycott the elections. Falcon put on a pretty good performance, I have to say. He's quite charismatic. He goes down the street kissing and shaking hands with everybody, and you know, he comes over as a man of the people, and he says he's going to bring change. And that the fact is, he's doing quite well in the polls. I mean, he's a long way behind Maduro. Maduro was on 51, according to the latest poll, if you can believe that. Maduro on 51, Falcon on 28. But if you put that together with the third place opposition candidate, who's an evangelical pastor, Javier Bertucci, who's on 16, and a lot of people are talking about this now, if those two were to come together in a common, on a single ticket before the 20th of May, that could bring them actually only a few points within reach of President Maduro, and that could make it quite a serious race. And this is clearly putting a lot of pressure on those old parties that insist that no, it's a fair process. We could have elections in December, they're saying now, but not now. It's not quite clear why they're saying that, because before they wanted the elections to be brought forward. When the government was planning to have them in December, they wanted the elections to be brought forward. Now the government has brought them forward, they want them to be in December. So it's quite a confused position they're presenting.
Now, tell me something. The opposition is moving back and forth. I wanted to go a little more in depth into how the opposition's position could either help or hurt Falcon.
Well, obviously, if those parties put their machines behind Falcon, you know, they still have a residual support and a tradition in this country. So if they put their resources and their support behind Falcon, then it would obviously boost him. It would give him an advantage. Excuse me. But it has to be said that there's a problem here, because that they have really dug themselves in so hard. They've been calling Falcon a kind of crypto Chavista, you know, a hidden Chavista. On the other hand, the Chavistas, of course, regard Falcon as some kind of a traitor because he was, many years ago, close to Chavez. So he occupies this sort of middle ground in that sense, where neither side, the traditional opposition, at least at the leadership level, don't really want to touch him. And that possibly makes it difficult for him to really move a lot beyond where he is now at about 28%.
And also, Ian, with the fractured opposition, because they have not yet decided to throw their support behind Falcon, where does the public stand in terms of Henry Falcon? And how does the opposition's sort of wishy-washy position hurt how he's being seen in the eyes of the voting public?
Well, I think there's always been a sector of course, you've got the traditional middle class, which is a minority, the middle class, upper middle class, who have always, in their majority, supported the opposition. And of course, you've always had, although a majority of the poorer sections of the population have been very solidly behind the Bolivarian revolution and Chavismo for the last, 18 years. There's always been, obviously, a sector of the population, not well off, who have inclined towards the opposition. And I think that's the area where Falcon is picking up. That's the kind of thing we saw in the streets today in Minas de Baruta. I think in that sector, which has always been sort of towards the opposition, but not the traditional opposition, if you like, I think that's the area where he's picking up support. Whether that can grow, I mean, obviously people are concerned about the economic situation, the big difficulties they have in their everyday life. People from all sides of the political spectrum want something to change about that. Of course, they don't agree about who will change it.
Okay, so thank you so much for that update, Ian Bruce. We've been speaking to Ian Bruce in Caracas about the Venezuelan elections. And we're going to keep on checking in with Ian all throughout this month until Election Day, May 20th. Now, construction workers in Panama are on strike against business owners who have not increased wages despite making huge profits.
During a press conference and after 15 days of strike, members of the Construction Workers Union gave the following statement regarding the ongoing negotiations.
There is nothing new. The business sector maintains their 5% per hour wage increase proposal, and that, for us, is totally unacceptable.
Workers continue to ask for an increase in wages of 10.9% annually over the next 4 years, but the counter-offer only increases wages by 5 cents per hour, depending on the worker's position. Workers consider that proposal is completely unfair since over the past 4 years, the industry got $36 billion in income, out of which 30 billion was net income.
Their proposal is not satisfactory for us. It's not fair compared to the $36 billion produced in the last 4 years.
On April 30th, during a general union assembly, construction workers decided not to give up until business owners provide them with a fair proposal. They say that those who control the funds are simply waiting for workers to give up.
They want to weaken and divide us, and a mass construction chamber is hurting the country, the workers and the industry. I think they are wrong.
95% of the building projects in the country have stopped, including public works. Resistance from the business sector clearly shows that this conflict is far from its end.
The landless workers' movement in Brazil began its national fair for the 3rd year in a row to discuss land reforms and bring together local farmers and producers. Farmers will bring to the fair about 350 tons of organic food produced by more than 800 campesinos without the use of pesticides and toxic chemicals. They will display fruits and vegetables from 24 different states. The fair, which will last for 4 days, will also give social movements the chance to discuss social rights.
This is the result of a process of struggle by the landless workers. And for this 3rd event, we brought more than 300 tons of food produced in our communities and temporary camps, where we fight for agrarian reform. Across the country in 24 states, We produced great agro-agricultural diversity, bringing healthy food for everyone, which is the culture of the landless movement. We bring our experience of agricultural ecology and artisan production methods and the flavors, colors and diversity of our produce.
Nosotros somos del estado de Sergipe.
We are from the state of Sergipe. We were the first to arrive with our truck filled with products, made in a family environment, so people from Sao Paulo can eat healthy food, without toxins. We have several settlements in Sergipe, and we are very proud of traveling every year to participate in the fair. We want to invite everyone to participate.
La Feria de Sao Paulo.
Dozens of Central American migrants have turned themselves into U.S. Border Authority Processing Center seeking asylum. They were part of a caravan of 140 migrants coming primarily from Honduras, El Salvador and Guatemala, who are escaping gang violence as well as political and economic turmoil in their countries. Lawyers on the scene say that those able to apply for asylum have been, for the most part, from Honduras. Others remain at the border alongside activists and legal counsel as they try to find a way to get their cases heard.
We are asking for asylum, that they help us, because the truth is we can't go back to the country. That's why we left there, because we are scared of many things.
I estimate that there are approximately another 70 caravan migrants who are on the border but haven't crossed yet. Some who will request asylum, others who are analyzing their cases, their possibilities.
The leftist favorite to be Mexico's next president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, suggested there could be changes to the country's constitution and a revocation ballot halfway through presidential terms. López Obrador, a three-time candidate, has used his campaign to ask people to vote for his Together We'll Make History coalition's legislative candidates, so the Congress can really be free from corrupt senators and representatives that ask for bribes.
Control over who is in power. Every 3 years, I did say 2 years before, but so as not to waste money, we will do it halfway through the presidential term with an election. The question will be whether you want the president to continue or resign.
In St. Kitts and Nevis, the government has implemented a National Marijuana Commission, which will survey the use of marijuana in the country in light of growing public lobby for the legislation of the plant. The commission was implemented last month, but there's been skepticism by the public who they'll be punished. Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris told the public even though he has his own views, he wants to learn more before making legislation.
That I want to learn more about the topic, like all of us. All of us want to understand not only the prevalence of marijuana use, the demographics and the sociological causes of its use, and the implications at the individual and wider societal level of marijuana use and abuse. I am keen, too, to see the arguments regarding the potential economic benefits of its cultivation and trade. Will it be a viable export? And in what form? In its primary form or in processed form? Where will be the markets? And how do we get around the UN prohibition of it as a dangerous substance? This, then, is a big and sensitive topic.
We're going to take a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Let's have a look at some stories making headlines around the world.
Pakistani journalists remember Afghanistan's slain journalists on World Press Freedom Day, days after the deadliest attack on the country's media since the fall of the Taliban in 2001. A double suicide blast in Kabul claimed by the Islamic State group left 25 people dead, including 10 journalists. Hundreds of railway workers and unions protested in France in what's become a month-old conflict, opposing the government and its plans to reform the state-run railroad company. Brian Pascoe, British union worker who made the journey to Paris for the occasion, told the crowds to continue their fight against the reform.
I wanted to spread my message on what is happening in the United Kingdom, so my CGT colleagues don't make the same mistakes that we made. They need to act early, they need to act fast, and they need to continue their dispute, because otherwise they're going to be in the same position that we're in. And it is not a very good one at the moment, because we're so fragmented.
A Saudi-led coalition airstrike has hit the National Center for Blood Transfusion and Research in Sana'a, Yemen. The airstrike caused serious damage to the center, and according to a spokesperson, it's been completely put out of service due to damage to imported medical equipment.
British voters have cast ballots in local elections considered a test of the public mood less than a year before the UK leaves the European Union. The local elections come less than a year after a snap election delivered a divided parliament and a minority government for Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May. Voting takes place to fill more than 4,000 seats on 150 local council in towns and cities only across England, since Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are not holding elections.
But only very marginally. This is one of the most marginal boroughs in the country. There's like 1 seat difference between the Conservatives and Labour, so it's really, really close. So it's obviously a lot riding on this election.
And the Dakar Art Biennale, one of the continent's biggest exhibitions of African contemporary art, opens in the Senegalese capital city of Dakar. From May 5th to June 2nd, more than 100 artists from across the continent will exhibit their work and perform. Held every 2 years, Dakar Art gives African and diaspora artists an opportunity to engage with each other and audiences from around the world. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Talisur English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.